Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. We're going to answer a question. Aaron Gartland sent us a question about Continental Championship Wrestling, USA Championship Wrestling, Southeastern Championship Wrestling. This is what he asked us to do. He said he would like to know about tickets by category, sold in each venue, and how they were sold. There was no Birmingham. I believe you could buy tickets in advance at the Boutwell Auditorium, but I believe that was it. There was no ticket locations, were there?
No, almost all the ticket locations were at the arenas in most cases.
There was no other way to buy tickets in Birmingham. Florence, you could only buy them the day of. I don't know that there was any advance tickets sold in Florence, Alabama. Meridian, Mississippi, when it ran, you could only buy it the day of. There was no advance tickets. Dothan was no advance tickets. You bought them that maybe an hour before the show, and those people get mad at you if you didn't open up right on time. Rodney knows. He was there many times. But there was no advance ticket locations. Really, there was not. They didn't have advance ticket locations. The only time they might have advance ticket location if there was a spot show that the sponsors got for the advanced ticket location, but then mostly it didn't. And a lot of times you didn't want to have advanced ticket location because a lot of times the money never came up. There was always some reason you would get there. They'd be $100, $200 short, and you don't know if they stuck that in their pockets or they just sold the tickets wrong. You didn't know.
Gave the tickets away or whatever. You never know.
So you just didn't do that. And Jack, I'm pretty sure you've run into advanced ticket locations where you figured they either pocketed it or they just didn't know how to sell tickets. As far as tickets go, very, very Knoxville, Tennessee, I believe, sold their tickets in advance at the Coliseum. I think Johnson City, Freedom Hall was on, not Freedom Hall, but the Recreation Center there. They only sold tickets the day of the event. There was no Chattanooga. I believe you could go to the Memorial Auditorium and buy your tickets in advance. But the advances wasn't that huge. I can remember even Knoxville, Tennessee, when we go to Knoxville, it would only do $3,000 or $4,000 in advance most of the time. And so you'd always think you was going to do horrible, and then you end up doing $36,000 gate at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. So you really couldn't go on the, used to you could say, I could do 3 times that. Am I correct, Rodney?
Right. The thing about it is the Continental Southeastern was always walk-up towns. It didn't matter. It was always walk-up towns.
He asked the question about the amount of programs. Programs, they'd only order about 500 each week. Very rare did they have a lot. And while we were there, now I don't know what they did while we wasn't there, but I remember picking up 500 programs. Dothan was a horrible place to sell merchandise. I mean, I got to the point I wouldn't even go there. I mean, nobody would buy nothing. It was just a bad town for that. Pensacola was the same way. You couldn't sell a lot of stuff in Pensacola. Birmingham, you would sell enough in Birmingham. You wouldn't even have to go the whole rest of the week. Birmingham was tremendous. We'd sell maybe 200 or 300 programs out of the 500 we'd have in Birmingham. Pictures, we'd sell everything we almost had in Birmingham. We'd always have to try to find something to sell the rest of the week. Yep. So Birmingham was tremendous.
And that was bad. That was bad when you had Birmingham on a Monday and then going to Friday night. It's going to be in Knoxville. You had nothing. You were tapped out.
And what would happen too if we was going to Birmingham? We were either going to go to Columbus, Mississippi, or we're going to go to Florence, Alabama on the next day. Now, sometimes the spot shows on Tuesdays, but if we were going to have to go to Florence and Columbus and we didn't have enough, that's when you would cry, because Columbus, Mississippi, tremendous town too. Sometimes we would order 500 programs, and if we did Birmingham on a Monday and Tuesday we hit Columbus, they would be gone. We would have none for the rest of the week. Now, Knoxville had its own program, and it was done by Bob Polk. So we didn't handle the programs there. He took care of them, sold them, and we did it first. And then I think Bob Polk thought we were making money, and he decided he didn't want us making no money, so he gave it to somebody else. He took it himself. I think that's what he did. As far as the merchandise sold, we don't know about everybody. We do know that Bullet Bob Armstrong, selling tremendous stuff on Monday nights. Everywhere he went. The person who sold the most stuff in Knoxville was Wendell Cooley. Wendell Cooley's stuff would sell tremendously, but we were one week, Rodney, and what will we sell sometimes? $7,000-8,000 sometimes during the week.
Through the whole week, yeah.
For the whole week. So we would sell 7,000-8,000. Maybe Tommy Rich, Johnny Rich, they might do 3,000 or 4,000 for the week. I mean, so merchandise was sold, and but we couldn't. Concessions, the only place they actually ran their own concession stand was in Mobile, Alabama, and the spot shows. It was good, but man, we never liked to do it.
For me, it was never enough money made for the aggravation that you had to go through. And of course, we did just sell it in Columbus, Mississippi as well.
Yes. Jack, what do you think of concession stands, food concessions? We never like to really handle them. How about you?
I've seen good and bad. I never liked to handle them either because it meant just a lot more work. And some places you could do pretty good off concessions. Other hand, you might be stuck with Dr. Pepper and hot dogs for weeks on end. so it was, to me, it was just never worth it. Now, I managed the theater for a few years where it was the exact opposite. That's where you made really where the theaters make their money. That's why they're so expensive. But wrestling, we couldn't do that. You couldn't pay $5 for a ticket and then pay $15 for concessions.
Aaron asked about the promotional and advertising revenue generated. No promotional advertising revenue was brought in by maybe television. I believe they had a deal with what was the name of the company that used to make houses? And
Jim Walter Homes.
Jim Walter Homes. They did have some type of agreement with Jim Walter Homes. We don't know what that was. For Continental Wrestling, we do not. That was between Ron Fuller and them. I don't know what their deal was. I do know that they talked about them a lot on that show, so I'm not for sure what type of agreement they had with them. But mostly there were barter agreements on television. So most of the time we got the Continental Wrestling or Georgia Championship Wrestling. They would get 7 minutes, and the other, and then you would get 7 minutes. And back then, if you went over those 14 minutes of commercial time, you could get fined for talking about anything and promoting anything and trying to make any money off of that. So you had to stick with that. That was way before the infomercial come along and could sell something the whole time. The promotional and advertising, talent, payroll, production, building, television, travel costs, that would be different. That would be different for every town. Birmingham was good. Rodney, what was Birmingham good on Monday nights? What was it good for almost every Monday night?
Oh, you'd have on average probably between 3,000 to 4,000.
And that would probably be what, a $12,000 gate back then with ticket prices where they were.
Ron Fuller could say that he could pay the entire payroll for the entire week just out of Birmingham. That's how good Birmingham was doing.
And Columbus, Mississippi, we sold the tickets there. What, $8,000 gate?
That about seven to eight, and we did pretty good. About $800 in concessions there, and Columbus, Mississippi was just an exception to the rule about concessions. But most places like Mobile, if we made $100, we'd be happy. That's about it.
Florence, Alabama. It was good for about $6,000 to $8,000 every time we went there until they had the cage match that went.
Right.
That took longer to put the cage up than it did to have the match.
Yes.
That was not very good, but every place was different. Knoxville, Tennessee, it was probably the best one because even years ago, ticket prices were more in Knoxville than they were anywhere else. So that could get up to, we were in 1989, we were drawing $36,000 gates in Knoxville, Tennessee. That was about the only town in 1989 that was drawing real good houses for David Woods and Continental Wrestling Federation. Meridian, Mississippi was good for what, $2,000 or $3,000 gates each and every week. It wasn't huge, but it didn't cost much to run Meridian, Mississippi. It was a very low cost deal. Montgomery.
Part of Meridian's problem was the arena.
Yeah,
it was not a good place.
There was no good parking around that place at all.
No, it was difficult. It was a difficult arena.
Montgomery, Alabama, maybe $4,000 for a long period of time. It was not good until Cat Collins came along. Cat Collins, which had been doing television for Jim Crockett Jr. For many years. He ends up in Alabama, Montgomery, contacts us, and back then, now you were very hesitant for somebody to say they knew what was going on. He said, "Now I was working for so and so," and you was like, "Hey, wait a minute, I don't know if he's telling the truth." So telephone calls were made to see if he actually was somebody that was in the wrestling business, and that. But Cat Collins come along, and that went from $4,000 to about $8,000. It doubled the arena because Cat Collins was such a huge radio personality. I have to ask this question. It's getting off a little. Is radio personalities what they used to be? Do they mean as much anymore as what they meant back in the 70s and in the early 80s?
No.
No. People don't listen to the radio like they used to.
Because you think about it, when you would have somebody from a radio station, and let's say it was somebody in Chattanooga back in the 1970s and early 80s, they would get a huge reaction from people. But now they're just like, who is that? Yes. It's sad that radio. There's a lot to this right now, Aaron. When you talk about promotional advertising, what talent was only guaranteed $40 a night. That was their guarantee. They were making more than that. Sometimes $600-$700 a week was on average, and probably in 1985, 86, 87, they were probably averaging $600 or $700 a week. In 1983, maybe they were making $280 a week, and that was just a little bit of time while we were there. We got there sometime in 1983. It was like maybe the Christmas in '88. It was horrible. Business was horrible, wasn't it, right?
Yes. So, they had good. We went down on Thanksgiving night, and it was good. We went back on Christmas night, and it was great. And then we would come back. We moved down through Christmas. We moved down there, and it was like somebody decided to shut the doors and tell people that the wrestling would be there. It was awful. I mean, it was awful.
Our father was only making the $40 a night. The guarantee, whatever he was guaranteed, 280, which would have been about 280. Sometimes they didn't run on Wednesdays at that time. They were just off on Wednesdays. And because they ran Monday was Birmingham, Tuesday was Mobile, Wednesday they were off, Thursday was Montgomery, Friday was a spot show around the area, probably Panama City. Saturday morning was Dothan TV. Saturday night was the Dothan Farm Center, and Sunday was Pensacola, Florida. Very easy territory, by the way. But he goes from making about $240 a week to making $2,400 to $3,000 a week when he gets to Mid-South Wrestling. He leaves there making that, which we never understood why he left, making that kind of money to go back there to only make about $300 or $400 a week. So he goes
and just so everybody knows, by the inflation calculator, that was $780 in today's money. So you've got to understand. But every production when they were at WTBY wasn't paid nothing for production. They may have paid $500 a week to make the dubs to send out to other people because they didn't have to pay for television back in those days until they started going into Birmingham. Straightforward, I believe maybe $1,200 a week is what they were being paid. And that was a lot of money back in 1985, 86. And I believe when what's the Cross Creek Productions come along, it went up to $2,500 a week, I believe, to do the tapings. But they had a whole lot better equipment than Straightforward did, by the way. But he also, this is what he asked too. He said, I can't help but think the Southeastern and Continental Championship Wrestling generated and spent a lot of money on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly and yearly basis, especially during the time the Northern and Southern divisions. I don't know what they would done in Knoxville. I don't know what we was never there. We were never in the Knoxville territory until Jim Barnett took it over. I know business was bad then, but it wasn't anything they were doing. They had great matches. It was just
that war killed Knoxville, killed that whole area. Because not only did they have a war with Bob Orton and Bob Roop, but there was the Savages they had to deal with as well. They were in part of that Kentucky as well. So you had so much bad stuff going on. It didn't hurt Memphis. So maybe it wasn't really, maybe it really had nothing to do with the promotion, or maybe the stuff they did just was horrible. I'm not for sure. I wasn't there, so I don't know if it was bad or good. I just know, but by the time Atlanta went there, they never could make it. Georgia Championship Wrestling taking over Southeastern Championship Wrestling never made any money the whole time it was there. Knoxville did some horrible crowds, but they tried to run on a Sunday afternoon, right before the Omni, I believe, didn't they, Rodney? So they could use the same.
Yeah, they would have never been able to make it to Knoxville to Atlanta. I don't think.
But it was just never. It just didn't do well on a Sunday afternoon. It was like at 2:00 or something, and it just never drew then. I think Knoxville always was a Friday night town, or it would do good on Saturdays as well, as long as you didn't have college football. At college football time, you would die in Knoxville.
Honestly, what Roop and them were doing in Knoxville would have hurt anybody. It didn't matter what it was. What they would do is they would advertise people from the other organization to be there that night. Okay, they pull a no-show, and then the fans are mad, and then they don't give them their money back. All right, they say they're because they get on TV, and Ronnie Garvin's challenging Ron Fuller to come to the match. If you got any guts, you'll be down there. People expect to see them when they get there, and there's nobody there, so it ended up killing the whole thing off.
But as far as generating, every town was different.
And honestly, I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Knoxville was sold, the Knoxville, and bought the southern area.
No, he was running both at one time. Okay. He had bought the southern part from the Fields, and he was running both of them at the time. Louis Tilley and Curtis, what's his name, Jack? Don Curtis?
Yes.
What's his name? They were the ones in the southern end that was running it, while Ron and Robert and them were running the one on the other side. Now, Charlie Platt believes that there could have possibly been a group in the southern division that was going to do the same thing that happened to him in the other division.
Oh, okay.
Which leads you to believe maybe wasn't always a nice person. So that's what he believes. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but he thought at the same time that because he remembers, Charlie says, I remember calling him and saying, you might want to get down here because something is not right here. And it's been done several times in the wrestling business. So, that would be a lot to have to take care of back in those days. But we don't know anything about the Northern Division, by the way. We wasn't there. We don't know nothing about it. We only know what we know while our father was working there. In 1983 for 6 weeks, business was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. He comes back, and sometime in 1984, business is horrible. He was not doing well. We go back in 1985, it was a completely different wrestling company. Business was tremendous from 1985 till about the summer 1987. Business was incredible. They made nothing but money. And Continental. There's so many other things. You asked the question, looking back, would it have been viable to expand the office, payroll, and production costs to expand concession programmers? I think at the time they probably should have. When David Woods bought Knoxville, they should have probably had 2 territories running. It was very hard to go from Knoxville, Tennessee on a Friday, and we booked Dothan, Alabama on a Saturday, which was done a few times because sometimes you had to. So I really, truly believe if you look back at it, probably 2 territories would not have been a bad idea. He maybe should have kept USA Championship Wrestling by itself and ran Continental separate as well because it just didn't work. Knoxville was drawn, but you couldn't run Dothan the way you needed to run it because Dothan needed to be run every week. And we had a whole thing that we were going to actually tape the show on the stage at the Civic Center every Saturday morning. So yeah, I could see that we needed to do that, but so many things. We could tell you the whole stories, but we're running out of time at this point. This thing is going a little long. But if you enjoyed this, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the page. Go one step further. Hit that notification bell. I'll tell you what, we'll talk more about it because we could get in depth with this, but be in depth with it. It's one of those things would have to be a 3 or 4 hour discussion on each town, and maybe even why Birmingham didn't quit drawing. I don't think it was because of bad booking. It was just about television. Don't you agree, Rodney?
Yes.
The loss of television.
Yes, and yeah, channel 6 moving the show around, and then moving to channel 21, and then moving to 17, and then back to 21 did not help anything at all.
There's a lot more we could talk about, and we will on the next video right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Now.